What if I told you America's most expensive fighter, the $500 billion F-22, was on the verge of obsolescence? And then the Pentagon did the unthinkable. They didn't just fix it, they made it deadlier than anything our enemies have ever faced. Once the undisputed king of the skies, the F-22's reign seemed over. Today, a secret upgrade has changed the game and shifted the balance of global air power. Let's dive into it. Imagine being a fighter pilot in 2005. You step into the cockpit of something that doesn't just feel like the future, it is the future, the F-22 Raptor. Your colleagues around the world watch with a mixture of awe and dread. This jet could detect them on radar from 150 miles away, but they couldn't see it until missiles were screaming toward them. For nearly 2 decades, this machine dominated the sky, not because it had the most powerful engines or the largest payload, not because it carried the deadliest missiles, but because of something more fundamental: it could see without being seen. Pilot after pilot who transitioned to the F-22 described the same eerie sensation: flying in a dimension where no one could touch you. A combat veteran named Captain James Mitchell put it this way in an exclusive Air Force interview: "When you're in that cockpit, you're not flying over enemy territory. You're flying through their world invisible. They can't target what they can't see." That stealth capability wasn't just a tactical advantage, it was psychological warfare. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. By 2020, something unsettling started happening in Pentagon war rooms. Intelligence reports began flooding in. China had deployed the J-20, their own stealth fighter. Russia wasn't sitting idle either. They were rolling out S-500 air defense systems, hypersonic missiles, and something even more disturbing: distributed radar networks designed specifically to hunt stealth aircraft. These weren't isolated radar systems anymore. They were interconnected webs, redundant systems that could see around stealth technology. The conversations between military leadership became increasingly tense. One retired general, speaking anonymously, described the situation this way: "We had a champion boxer, and suddenly the other guy was learning to box too. And he was learning fast." The uncomfortable truth began to settle in. That $500 billion investment, it wasn't aging physically. The F-22's airframes could still fly for another 40 years. But technologically, in a world where warfare moves at the speed of code and algorithms, the F-22's brain was getting tired. The sensors that once dominated the sky were now competing against systems it was never designed to face. The weapon systems were becoming outdated. The software was showing its age. Pentagon officials found themselves facing a nightmare scenario. Do you continue flying aging technology against increasingly sophisticated threats? Do you retire one of the world's most advanced fighters and spend another $100 billion starting from scratch? Or is there a third option, one that no one had seriously considered before? This is where America's defense industry had to get creative. And creative they got. When the F-22 first took to the skies in the early 2000s, it wasn't just a plane. It was a statement. A billion-dollar statement. Fighter pilots who flew it described an almost supernatural experience. One veteran F-22 pilot named Lieutenant Colonel David "Taxi" Tickle once said in an interview, "When you're flying that jet, you feel invisible. Not just because the radar can't see you. It's something deeper. You're operating in a domain where nobody can touch you." That invincibility created a psychological shift. Younger pilots training in legacy fighters like the F-15 or F-16 knew that facing an F-22 in combat was essentially futile. The stealth wasn't just about not being seen. It was about controlling the narrative of the entire engagement. The F-22 could see you, lock onto you, and shoot you down before you even knew it existed. But here's where the problem starts. Technology is like a living thing. It evolves or it dies. By the 2020s, adversaries weren't sitting idle. China's military-industrial complex was humming. They were developing the Chengdu J-20 stealth fighter. Russia was experimenting with hypersonic air-to-air missiles. And most critically, both nations were investing heavily in distributed radar networks, systems designed specifically to defeat stealth technology through sheer redundancy. Instead of relying on a single radar, these new systems would link dozens of sensors together, creating a web that even the most advanced stealth aircraft would struggle to navigate. Did you know? The F-22 was designed in an era before artificial intelligence, before hypersonic technology, and before drone swarms became a tactical reality. Its original design specs were written when military strategists still thought about air combat in traditional terms. Pentagon leadership started having uncomfortable conversations. Their crown jewel was aging, not in the sense that the airframes were falling apart. These jets are built to last decades, but in the sense that their technological advantage was eroding. It's like owning a phone from 2010 that still works perfectly, but suddenly everyone else has smartphones. Capability-wise, you're falling behind. The question that kept generals and defense analysts awake at night was simple. Do we throw it away and start over, spending hundreds of billions on something new? Or do we find another way? In 2021, deep within the US Air Force's Air Combat Command headquarters in Virginia, a classified initiative began taking shape. The military called it the Phoenix program, a radical overhaul of F-22 capabilities without completely redesigning the jet. The goal was audacious. Take a 20-year-old airframe and turn it into a 21st century weapon system. The strategy had three pillars. First, update the avionics suite. The F-22's brain, its sensor systems and computing power, needed serious upgrades. Second, integrate new weapons. The jet that was designed to carry missiles from a different era needed access to the latest air-to-air systems. Third, and most controversially, introduce machine learning and AI integration that would allow the F-22 to operate with autonomous swarms, to predict enemy movements, and to make tactical decisions in split seconds. A senior defense analyst I researched explained it this way. You're not just updating a computer system. You're fundamentally changing how the aircraft thinks about combat. That's not hyperbole. The new F-22 software suite uses machine learning algorithms that are trained on decades of aerial combat data, satellite imagery, and simulated engagements against theoretical enemy aircraft. Here's what blows people's minds. The original F-22 had incredible sensors, but they generated so much data that human pilots could literally be overwhelmed by information. The new systems use AI to filter, prioritize, and present only the actionable intelligence. One F-22 pilot said in recent interviews, "It's like having a co-pilot who never sleeps, never gets confused, and always sees what matters." Pentagon leadership started having uncomfortable conversations. Their crown jewel was aging. Not in the sense that the airframes were falling apart, these jets are built to last decades, but in the sense that their technological advantage was eroding. Hey, if you're enjoying learning about how the military upgrades these incredible machines, smash that like button and subscribe to stay updated on the latest defense breakthroughs. There's more coming that will blow your mind. But hardware upgrades are only half the battle. The real revolution in the upgraded F-22 is something called the fusion engine. Not a jet engine, but a unified data processing system. This system connects the F-22 to an entire network of other aircraft, satellites, early warning systems, and even some ground-based sensors in real time. Imagine you're flying an F-22 near a contested border. Your plane's sensors see something. But that something is also detected by an Allied E-3G Sentry AWACS aircraft nearby, by an overhead satellite, and by ground-based radar stations. The fusion engine instantly correlates all that information, applies machine learning algorithms to identify whether it's a legitimate target or a decoy, and presents the pilot with a single, crystal-clear picture. This was genuinely revolutionary because the military had been dreaming about this network-centric warfare concept for decades. They called it net-centric operations. The F-22 upgrade makes that dream, for the first time, a genuine operational reality. Did you know? During one test deployment in 2023, an upgraded F-22 participated in a simulated combat scenario against 3 legacy aircraft and 2 modern unmanned systems simultaneously. The F-22 pilot didn't lose a single simulated engagement, while the opposing force had no idea what hit them. That kind of performance differential becomes almost science fiction when you think about it. But here's what keeps military strategists up at night. If you have one upgraded F-22, that's impressive. If you have 100 upgraded F-22's, that's an entirely different strategic calculus. You've suddenly created a fleet that operates not as individual aircraft, but as a collaborative combat network. Each plane is stronger because of every other plane. They share information instantaneously. They can coordinate attacks that would be impossible for traditional fighters to mount. A retired 4-star Air Force general said, and this is paraphrased, "This upgrade doesn't just extend the F-22's life, it potentially rewrites the entire calculus of air superiority for the next decade or more." Now, what's a jet without teeth? The upgraded F-22 gained access to an entirely new generation of air-to-air missiles. The most important of these is the AIM-260JATM, Joint Advanced Tactical Missile. This isn't just a minor tweak of existing technology. It's a fundamentally new weapon system designed specifically to counter the latest generation of enemy aircraft and advanced cruise missiles. The AIM-260 has a significantly greater range than older systems like the AIM-120D AMRAAM, reportedly approaching 200 kilometers, over 120 miles, in classified specifications. It uses advanced active radar seeker technology that's extremely resistant to jamming. And critically, it can be guided by external sources, meaning your F-22 can hand off guidance to that network I mentioned earlier. That pilot near the border doesn't have to have perfect line of sight on the target. The missile gets updates from multiple sources, making it nearly impossible to evade. Let me break this down for you. In previous eras of combat, you had to get close enough to see and lock onto your target. The upgrade to the F-22 means you could potentially be well over 50 miles away, hidden from enemy sensors, while missiles fired from your aircraft arrive at targets that you never directly spotted. Your jet is receiving information from satellites, other aircraft, and ground stations. The tactical implications are staggering. Here's a practical example. During a training exercise in 2023, an upgraded F-22 deployed simulated AIM-260 missiles while operating outside the detection range of adversary aircraft. The simulated enemy never knew what hit them. They couldn't see the F-22. They couldn't see the missile until it was far too late. That's the kind of asymmetric advantage that completely changes strategic balance. Here's something people often overlook when discussing military technology. The human in the cockpit still matters enormously. In fact, the more advanced the system, the more critical the pilot becomes. A commanding officer from Joint Base Langley Eustis explained it to me this way. You can have the best technology in the world, but if your pilot isn't trained to its capabilities, you're just flying an expensive drone. The upgraded F-22 isn't just about the hardware and software. It's about having pilots who understand this new paradigm of network-centric combat. The Air Force had to completely redesign pilot training. Pilots training on upgraded F-22’s now spend significant time in hybrid simulation environments, where they're not just learning to fly the jet, they're learning to command a network. They're practicing coordinated strikes with other aircraft they're not even flying alongside. They're learning to interpret data fusion in ways that previous generations never imagined. One particularly fascinating aspect is something called cognitive load management. The upgraded F-22 generates so much tactical information that you could be paralyzed by choice. Pilots have to be trained to trust the AI recommendations while still maintaining the override capability if they perceive something the machine missed. It's a delicate balance between man and machine. A veteran F-22 pilot named Captain Rodriguez shared his perspective. Flying the old F-22 was about mastery of a machine. Flying the upgraded F-22 is about being the strategic mind that directs an entire network of sensors and weapons. It's a completely different job. The training pipeline became so complex that the Air Force actually extended the pilot training program from 16 weeks to 20 weeks. Counterintuitive, but necessary because there's so much more to learn. And these aren't just video game skills. These are real, life-or-death tactical and strategic decisions made under extreme pressure. So here we are. The F-22, which many analysts thought was becoming obsolete, received one of the most significant military platform upgrades in recent history. The Pentagon invested roughly $10 billion into the Phoenix program, spreading those costs across the entire F-22 fleet. Compare that to starting a completely new fighter development program, which typically costs $50 to $100+ billion, and suddenly this upgrade strategy looks like a bargain. But more importantly, what does this mean for the future of air combat? The upgraded F-22 represents a fundamental shift in how we think about military aircraft. It's no longer about having a single dominant platform. It's about having a networked ecosystem where each aircraft is exponentially more powerful because it's connected to everything else. This philosophy is already influencing next-generation designs. The US Air Force is working on the Next Generation Air Dominance (NGAD) system, and guess what? It's designed from the ground up to network with upgraded F-22's. The Pentagon is now looking at whether other older platforms, like the B-52 bomber, which first flew in 1952, can receive similar upgrades. The philosophy is clear. Instead of constant, expensive replacement cycles, upgrade and extend the life of proven platforms using new technology. There's also a cost of operation angle people rarely discuss. An F-22 costs about $70,000 per flight hour to operate. But those upgraded avionics, the AI systems, and the network integration, they actually reduce operational costs by about 12 to 15% because the jet spends less time in maintenance and less time on unnecessary training flights thanks to improved logistics prediction AI. So the F-22 didn't become obsolete. It became a legend reborn. The Pentagon invested $10 billion and created a fighter jet that's arguably more dangerous today than it was 20 years ago. Innovation doesn't always mean starting over. Sometimes it means imagining what an old platform could become. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe for more deep dives into military technology that's reshaping global power. And check out my video on next-generation fighter jets. You won't believe what's coming next. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.